Broadcast live from the Legislative Chamber at the Omaha Douglas Civic Center, located at 1819 Farnham Street. I would like to remind those in attendance in the chamber today that we must abide by the City Council ordinance requiring that all those present wear a face mask or a face covering in indoor public settings in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Please also continue to be mindful of social distance, and you all look great. Thank you. Safety briefing. I'd like to invite our Vice President of Safety, Security, and Business Continuity, Shane Hunter, to provide a briefing regarding protocol for all individuals in attendance at the board meeting today in the event of an emergency. Oh, well, thank you.
Good morning. Shane Hunter, Vice President of Safety and Security. As you've noted, we are at 1819 Farnham Street in the Legislative Chambers, which is on the second floor of this building, known internally as the LC level. We had normal entry and exit path the way we came in this morning, but there are emergency exits on either side of the room behind the accordion panels, where you'll also find the nearest fire extinguishers in this space. Behind this one over here is the only AED in this space, and with the location of the AED in mind, may I have a show of hands, CPR and AED training. Thank you. Should a medical emergency arise, we will have Security Manager Zach Valentine contact 911 and meet them at the bottom of the escalator. Should we need to evacuate the building for any reason, we'll be using this stairway over here, go down one floor and meet outside. Should we need to seek shelter inside, we'll go down the same stairwell for 2 floors, and that concludes the briefing.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Mary.
Kavanaugh?
Here.
Bagley?
Here.
Cook?
Here.
Friend?
Here.
Frost?
Here.
McGowan?
Here.
Howard?
Here. I would also like to advise those in attendance that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is available on the wall of the Legislative Chamber. Construction and operations. And today, Mr. O'Brien, capital expenses, please.
Good morning. We had a late lineup change yesterday, so I'm filling in for Mr. Knight on the CNA letter, and I'll try and do it justice. Before I get to the CNA letter, though, I would like to just make a couple comments about water and gas demands for October, as it was a strong month for both products, which is kind of unusual. The first half of October, Corey O'Brien, Vice President, Engineering and Construction, and also Interim Chief Operations Officer. The first half of October was a record demand for water. We had almost 1.7 billion gallons sold. For the month, October was a 10-year high for water demand, and so we sold just over 2.9 billion gallons. And also on the gas side, October gas sales were 45% over budget, which is the highest since 1974. So unusual month, good, but unusual. A couple other things that I'm going to pass on from Mr. Knight. Natural gas prices for this winter are projected to be 30% higher than last winter, but last winter's prices were also near 25-year lows, so it's probably just more of an adjustment back to normal. The U.S. storage of natural gas is 8% above last year and 8% above the 5-year average, which is also very good. And last, Chief Meteorologist Knight asked that I pass on that per the National Weather Service, the winter forecast for Omaha is normal. Whatever that is, given that it's 75 on the 5th of November. So, okay, yes.
With the demand for water and gas and the records you said, did we have any operational issues meeting all the demand?
Not to my knowledge, no. Things went smoothly, and that's a credit to our team on both sides, because we do have a fair number of pieces of equipment out of service or Florence is down and things like that. So it's things went smoothly, and that's a credit to our team.
Good, thank you.
Yeah. That. Okay, moving on to the CNA letter. It's a long letter this month, and I'm not going to go over a lot of it, but there's 4 projects I do want to highlight. But certainly if you have any questions or comments about any of the projects, please speak up. The 4 that I'm going to talk to are under buildings, plants, and equipment. The first one being item number 1. This is a request for about $750,000 for professional services to develop a long-term water distribution system master plan. The district water distribution system is a complex network of over 3,000 miles of mains, water towers, reservoirs, pump stations, and pressure zones working together to move water across the city to provide reliable water and fire protection. This proposed plan will provide a comprehensive roadmap for the major capital improvements necessary to provide water service to our growing distribution system and for changing water usage over the next 30 years. And I would comment that the document that we're talking about right now is the first step in what it should be considered a living document, and that it itself won't last for 30 years. It will have to be updated periodically, and we would typically look to do that in somewhere in the 3 to 5 year range. So the proposed plan would include some near-term considerations, including large volume water customers such as data centers along the Highway 50 corridor in Sarpy County, and the continuing metropolitan growth towards the west. Additionally, the plan will analyze capacity and improvements necessary to provide service to Plattsmouth as their water treatment plant was impacted by the March 2019 flood, and they consider the district as a source of water. Approval of this CNA will authorize the President to enter into an agreement with HDR Engineering, Inc. to provide services required to develop the master plan. HDR has extensive experience with master plan projects for large utilities. Their background with the district's hydraulic model provides unique knowledge and efficiencies for analyzing and developing our plan. Other engineering firms were contacted, but they elected not to bid, as they are not as familiar with our system, and as is HDR, and they did not feel that they could competitively bid this project. A couple other little things. The last time we updated our master plan was 1987, so a long time ago. It's really not serving us much purpose at this point. And the anticipated time frame for this project would be about 12 months. Before I go on to the next thing, are there any questions about this? Yes, Director
I
Cook.
have a question. You said you contacted other firms and they said no thank you. What are the protocols for identifying firms to contact? Is it kind of like, oh yeah, we know they do water? What's the process?
That's a part of it. I'm going to look to Masa maybe to correct me if I misspeak, but yeah, it's largely the known players. I mean that we are aware of that we would contact, and I don't know if Masa or John, there was another process used. Yeah, come on up.
Please.
Morning.
Good morning.
Masa, Director of Infrastructure Integrity and Interim Vice President of Water Operations. We're talking with other utilities that have done master plans with consultants.
Do
And
you want to move over just a little bit so the mic picks you up there?
Good, thank you.
yeah, so we'll contact other utilities that have done water system master plans and who they've used. So we collect a whole list and also talk to engineering firms who are comfortable handling this size of a project. And so we had a list of 3 or 4 that we sent it out to.
Okay. So peer utility companies around the country or our region.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Masa. Any other questions on that item? Okay. Item number 2 under buildings, plants, and equipment is about a $610,000 request to replace the propane cavern water pump at 117th and 4th Streets. We were recommending the replacement of the deep well water pump at the 117th and 4th Street propane cavern. This cavern is considered a wet cavern in that groundwater seeps into the cavern continuously. The pump we're talking about pumps that groundwater out of the cavern daily at the rate of about 3,500 gallons a day. The pump itself is about 500 feet below ground. There are 100 5-foot sections of pump shaft that go down to the pump. The existing pump is about 60 years old and original to the plant. And given its age and its importance to our operation, we feel it's time to replace that pump. Along with the pump replacement, while the pump and the shafts are removed, we would look at the casing to make sure that it is in good shape to continue use for a long time. Again, with this item, Approval of this CNA will authorize the president to enter into an agreement with WSP USA Incorporated to complete the replacement of the cavern water pump. WSP is an industry expert in storage caverns, and they have completed previous cavern projects for the district. My curiosity got the better of me. I did look up what WSP stands for. It stands for Williams Sale Partnership, and the people we work with primarily are out of Houston. The pump would be purchased this fall and be replaced next summer. Any questions on that item? Okay, moving right along to the next one, which will be item number 3. This is just under $1 million request to replace a security fence at 2 locations, one being the Operation and Construction Center campus, the other being the LNG production facility and propane air plant. This request would replace about 12,000 feet of fence, too many pipe conversations, 12,000 feet of fence, about 6,000 feet at each location. The existing fence is being replaced due to age and condition. The fences at the operating center were installed in 1963, and the fences at the LNG plant in 1974, they're original to those facilities. Now, sections of these fences have been previously replaced, and what we're proposing on this request will replace the remainder of the fence and match what's already been done. The existing fence is 6 feet chain link. The proposed fence will be 8-foot chain link with 3 strands of barbed wire on top on outriggers. There will also be a mow strip along the bottom to increase the longevity of the fence. The increase in fence height is per district standards, and in an effort to further advance the district's security posture, regulated by CISA, which stands for Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, via the Department of Homeland Security. Any questions on this item? Okay, one more, bear with me, I'm just about done. The last one is item 5. It's a $888,000 request to purchase 25 extended cab 4x4 pickups for various departments. The district has about 112 half-ton pickups in our fleet. This purchase is phase 1 of a multi-year plan, a 3-year plan, to renew that pickup fleet. The pickups that will be replaced in this phase range in mileage from 125 to 190,000 miles. And this request is in the proposed 2021 capital budget. We're asking for approval at this time to gain 3 months of order time to minimize the time that those existing trucks are in the fleet and to have the new trucks ready for the 2021 construction season. Any questions on that item or any others? Director Kavanaugh?
Are they diesels or gasoline powered?
The existing ones, Andy, are they a mix of, where are you? They're all gasoline?
Diesel will get a lot more mileage out of them than 90,000 or 100,000 even.
Mm-hmm. You want to come up and maybe talk to that, Andy?
But I don't know how practical the diesel is either in this climate, so.
You know, we've historically, and I'm going back to former positions, but we've used diesel in some of the heavier duty trucks, but not so much in the half-ton category, and I'll let Andy speak beyond that.
Morning, Andy Melville, Vice President, Field Service Operations. To answer your question, diesel aren't the best in this situation. There's a lot of idle time, depending on what the usage of the vehicle is. And with the new emission standards, idling with diesel is not good on the equipment. And the price point up front is significantly greater for a diesel than it is a gasoline.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Any other questions on those? Yes, so we looked at CNG, and we look at CNG in every option. Excuse me. Anytime there's a manufacturer change in engine, then the engine has to be re-evaluated by EPA. And at this point, CNG is not an option. No engine manufacturers have actually gone to the point of getting certification for CNG engines for this model year. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Any other questions about any of our items this morning? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Henn, acceptance of contracts, please.
Good morning.
Morning.
Stephanie Henn, Director of Plant Engineering. I will be discussing the finals letter this morning behind tab 6. We have 5 finals this month. All of them are water mains. 4 of them are one of our regular contractors, Cedar Construction. Another one is with Tab Construction. I'm going to highlight just a few of these. Item A on page 1 was a large project, one of our big data projects down in Sarpy County, which we were calling Project Wizard. This was the phase 1 of that. Cedar Construction was our contractor. There was a decrease in unit quantities of about 30,000, mainly due to less boring and more open trenching of pipe. There was also a change order increase of about $50,000. This was mainly due to some coordination and staking issues. They changed the size of the shoulders, and so it took a little while to figure that out. There was some loss in time and productivity and some more equipment rental because of that. I'd also like to call your attention to both items B and D, kind of collectively. On page 1 and 2, there were some cost increases on both of those projects. Earlier in the year, we made some changes to our standards, and these were mainly due to shoring, pipe wrapping, and taping standards of the pipe. Anytime we make a change to our standards, we want to implement them right away. And these projects had already been bid, so we have to compensate the contractor for that because there was a change after they bid the project. You might have remembered earlier in the year, like last year, we started talking about ductile iron pipe, and we were sometimes having some corrosion issues. We made a change to our standards to change it to zinc-coated pipe to help with some of the corrosion issues we were having. We also have polyethylene encasement on it, which basically looks kind of like a trash bag, what it used to be, kind of like a black trash bag. We made a change to V-Bio, which now looks like a white trash bag more than anything. It also has some corrosion inhibiting properties. And one thing, just a little piece of information, my inspectors in the field have found that small change to be a good deal, not only because of the corrosion inhibiting properties, but the pipe itself is black, and now you have a quote-unquote white trash bag over it, so it's very easy for my inspector to see when there's a split in that polyethylene encasement because the pipe is black, the encasement is white, and so they can pick that up a whole lot sooner, and they can be retaped and fixed before the pipe is ever, the hole is ever closed up. So that's been kind of a good deal. I'd also like to talk about item number C on page 2. This was our first PVC project that we're finaling out. PVC is a plastic material. We haven't done a lot of this yet. We've done one IR project. This was our first development project. So because it's PVC and it's plastic, we don't need that polyethylene, that V-Bio that we need on the other ones. So this is kind of a newer technology for us. Project went well. We learned some things. Contractor learned some things. I think we're going to continue to try this. But this is the first one that we're finaling out. So at that point, I'm glad to take any questions or comments. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zellers, please review bids.
Good morning. John Zellers, Vice President, Procurement and Enterprise Services. Bids on materials and contracts may be found under tab 7. There's several items I'd like to discuss this morning, and they all may be found on page 2. The first item is at the top of the page. We received a bid from Sirius for a 56-month subscription service through Cisco to centralize and consolidate contact center solutions at the district to one platform. Currently, the district supports 2 contact center platforms. The customer service call center is through SAP, and other contact functions as the customer-facing IVR, IT help desk, emergency dispatch are through a Cisco platform. Consolidating into one platform reduces overall costs, increases efficiency by managing one platform, and provides additional workforce and quality management functions. IT compared both the SAP and Cisco platforms, in which they concluded that the Cisco option had more benefit to the district through more technical resource availability and support, in-house expertise on the product, Cisco being a window-based solution, and better integration with our current telephone system. As has been discussed with the board in the past, Sirius is our Cisco preferred provider and provides the best pricing for Cisco products. The subscription will be paid on an annual basis at $138,750 a year for the first 4 years and $92,500 for year number 5. Cisco's bid is being recommended for approval. The last several items I'd like to discuss are associated with equipment and vehicles. We accepted bids for 8 hydraulic breakers, in which we are recommending the bid from Murphy Tractor. Their bid was the only one received that met specifications. As part of the bid analysis, we did reach out to other bidders to allow them to provide a breaker to demo, in which Bobcat was the only one that responded. The breaker they provided did not meet expectations. Therefore, we are recommending Murphy Tractor's bid be approved. We accepted bids for the 25 half-ton pickups that were previously discussed. We are recommending the second lowest bid, as the bid submitted by Gene Steffi Auto did not meet specifications regarding door configuration. The specifications require 4 doors, with the rear doors swinging from the front of the vehicle to the rear, and some of us may call these suicide doors. This allows for easier loading of equipment and tools into the back of the cab. Lastly, we are recommending the bid from Dual Lift for 8 14,000-pound tandem axle trailers. Dual Lift was the lowest bidder that met specifications for the required 2-year warranty. And that's all I have for you this morning, and be happy to answer any questions.
John, I've got just a couple questions. The first one is just more your thoughts. I'm a little surprised that we didn't sent out 3 bids and only received 1 for that much fencing work. Any thoughts on that?
You know, I did speak with engineering on that, and we did have a pre-bid meeting in which we did have 3 contractors show up. And it was difficult for them to understand. Actually, there was interest at the time of the pre-bid meeting. We don't have a really good understanding as to why the other 2 bidders did not bid. We did bid this project back in 2018 as well, which also included fencing out at Platt South. And at that time, we did receive 3 bids. So there must have been a decision on those other contractors evaluating this particular project as to not moving forward with submitting a bid for us. Now, Elkhorn did bid the last time, and their pricing is representative of what they bid the last time.
Is this project or projects, because it's more than one location, need to be started or finished within a time frame, like coming up on winter, and maybe that's why the other contractors didn't have the horsepower to get that done?
I don't know that answer, and would probably refer to Stephanie.
Steph Hand, Director of Plant Engineering. There isn't actually a really tight time frame on it. We're actually going to be spending money into 2021. This was just kind of to get the project going. We did talk to those other contractors, and they just said they're busy and just weren't interested at this point.
Okay, I'm just curious. That's a big job, and I would think any fencing contractor would like to have. I mean, most of this is open. It's not like you're dealing with people's backyards, so it seemed like a prime business opportunity to me. But thank you.
You bet.
John, I do have one other on these Ford trucks. I'm assuming it's Ford since the bid was Sid Dillon Ford. If you know, is there a significant cost difference between the suicide door style 4-door and the other 4-door that they open? If it's a room issue, wouldn't the fuller size 4-door cab give you even more room?
Well, I think when I discussed this, I actually had this discussion with Mr. Melville when we made I'm going to say I challenged the recommendation on going with the second low bid. And that the way that these are utilized out in the field, especially when you're in traffic and so forth, by opening in the conventional way, then the operator of the vehicle, say a locator or a field engineer or field tech, would then have to step back to be able to go around and open the other door in order to access the back of the vehicle to get his or her equipment out of it. versus being able to open this door and be able to open this door. So the other manufacturers, Dodge, Chevy, do not offer that option. So that was a specific specification requirement, and Ford is the manufacturer that offers that.
So is this a Ranger or is this an F-150? Because both of them, I think, are half-ton and the Ranger's smaller. I'm just,
These are F-150s.
Oh, they are? Okay.
Yes.
Just curious, thanks.
Yes.
It sounds as much a safety issue as it is a utility issue, so that's good.
Correct.
I'm glad you
Correct.
recognize that.
Yes.
We owe that to the folks in the field.
Yes, we do. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Legislative and Judicial, Mr. Kubat, please. Proposed declaration and sale of surplus land parcel.
Good morning. This is an abandoned well house at 148th and F. It's on a corner lot. It's a relatively small lot of 0.1847 acres, or just over 8,000 square feet. It's part of the old Millard water system. It's been decommissioned. It's no longer needed for district use. And this is a request for the board to declare the property surplus and to allow general counsel to undergo the process of getting the property sold. There any questions or?
Rick, I've got a quick question for you. This property, does it have all utilities run to it besides just obviously water, since it's a pump house? If you know.
This is confusing to me. You know, I know it's a pump house, but it doesn't have any gas or water service lines being currently fed into the building. So I assume the pump house is water leaving, but as far as being able to turn on tap water, it currently does not have those facilities.
Just curious, I didn't know what the value of that would be if it doesn't have the other utilities that somebody wanted to use it for. I don't think it's even a residential area, but I'm not sure what R7 means. Anyway, just curious.
It's got an apartment complex on one side, and then it's really the first lot as an entry into the neighborhood. There are some other hindrances of the property. There's an OPPD transformer station on the lot with bollards, and that would probably cost about another $3,000 to $5,000. So there's some hindrances associated with the property. That being said, that there's some unique things that we can do as far as making sure that we get an appropriate sale price. We'll certainly reach out to the homeowners association and the surrounding neighbors.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rick. Good luck with the 2021 legislative session.
We're getting close.
Mr. Mendenhall, please review proposed purchase agreement.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Chair Howard. Mark Mendenhall, Senior Vice President, General Counsel. Behind tab 10, you will find a recommendation that really ratifies and authorizes the execution of an agreement that we had entered into with the owners of a piece of property, approximately 52.5 acres. This is property off of Blair High Road and State Street. And this is an agreement that we had entered into with the owner of the property in early October. We were not able to, based on timing, to get it in front of you all by the October 3rd board meeting. And so pursuant to that agreement, I am required to bring it in front of you all at the next board meeting. So here we are today. And again, this is a recommendation to enter into a purchase agreement for that approximately 52.5 acres. The purchase price right now is $1.75 million, which is approximately $34,000 per acre. And the reason for purchasing this property is, as you are all aware, we have been speaking to you all in various capacities about our need for an alternate construction center. And we have identified this piece of property as potentially viable to support that construction center. And so right now, we are underway with due diligence to ensure that this is an appropriate piece of property to support that construction center. That due diligence period pursuant to the agreement is 90 days in length, and so When I say well on our way, we're talking about completing a boundary survey, a topographic survey, an environmental study of the property, a traffic study of the property, and then some high-level conceptual designs as far as putting essentially squares and rectangles of what would be the building on the property and see where it would fit the best. And if this property does meet our needs, and we have determined it's an appropriate piece of property, and that's a determination that will take place by really a team of folks that will make a recommendation up to the senior staff. Once that determination is made, then I'll come back in front of you all, or Mr. Doyle will come back in front of you all and recommend that we move forward with closing on the property. So really right now, I'm not asking for any authorization of money, but we're asking to enter into this agreement. That 90-day time period does have a $25,000 down payment, essentially an earnest money deposit that we've put in escrow with the closing company. If during this 90 days, we have determined, listen, this property is just not right for one reason or another, then we can step away from the agreement and that $25,000 will be returned. After that 90 days, if we're still completing due diligence, though, that $25,000 would go to the seller of the property. One other thing that I would mention that is going to take us a bit of time, and it's a process that's underway contemporaneously with our due diligence, is the property is currently zoned DR. And DR in the Omaha City Municipal Code stands for Developmental Reserve. And so it's really not zoned any one particular, and what we're looking for is GI, General Industrial. So it's not zone GI. So in order to have it a zoning change from the DR to the GI, we've got to go through a process with the City of Omaha Planning Commission, the Planning Board, and then ultimately the City Council. And we are optimistic that that change will occur, primarily because the City of Omaha keeps a future land use map. And on that future land use map, they identify here's where this might be GI and this might be R7. And this piece of property is anticipated to be GI on that future land use map. So we're really optimistic that an industrial site would work well there. So any questions? Happy to answer. It's a really exciting opportunity, I would say.
Question, I'm not really familiar with that area out there. How far is this property from our headquarters, building, new headquarters?
Oh, boy, as the crow flies, I would say a couple miles, Mr. McGowan. I'm looking for, I don't know if anybody.
About 4 miles.
Okay,
Straight
there we go.
west?
Hey, thank you, Mr. Friend. Yeah, so approximately 4 miles. So right off of the interstate, was that 680? And then it's essentially, so we're looking at a piece of property that you all are all aware that was really at that intersection. We had some, I guess, unexpected challenges with that piece of property, and then this is really the next property just to the northwest of that. And so it's really just right off the interstate and good access, it seems like. But again, there's some challenges that we have to work through to ensure that it's the appropriate piece of land. Yes, sir.
It might be early, but do you anticipate any pushback from residents in the area, even though it's sparsely populated? Do you anticipate anything, and will there be a plan in place to reach out to those folks before anything is done?
Oh, absolutely, there would be a plan. I think it's too early to believe there would be pushback. So, for example, this seller, they actually also own some property on the other side of Blair High Road, Highway 133. That land there is a lot closer to some residential subdivisions. That might receive more pushback. But it's surrounded on one side by the highway, State Street on the other side, and then Irvington Road, and then a creek, Thomas Creek. And so it's a heavily, I guess, wooded creek. And so I think as far as noise or like dust, things like that, I think that we should be able to keep those to a low level of nuisance for the neighbors. And we'll certainly, I would anticipate that we'll have a good communication plan with those neighbors once we get to that point, to let them know that we hope to be their neighbor and we hope to be a good neighbor for them, just like we are at 61st Street.
Hey, Mark, really quick, I just want to commend you and the management team. This has been a long time in coming. to have this second area to house equipment from a safety standpoint, from a continuity of service standpoint. So thanks for all the work you've done on this, and I look forward to the progress on this.
Certainly a team effort, but thank you, Mr. Bagley. Appreciate that. Any other questions? Happy to answer. Otherwise, I anticipate we'll be giving you updates as these 90 days progress and hope to be back in front of you at some time in January. And if it's not the right piece of property, though, we're certainly not going to go forward with it. We'll make sure it's the right one. Thank you.
Thank you. Personnel, Ms. Savine, please, wage and salary increases and ratifications.
Thanks, Gwen. Good morning. Bonnie Savine, Vice President, Human Resources. A quick recap of employee counts, and ironically, October of 2019 and 2020 were identical. 809 regular full-time employees with 4 regular part-time employees for a total of 813. We do currently have 2 temporary employees, or did at the end of October. Behind tab 11, you will also find the wage and/or salary increases and ratifications letter. Human Resources is recommending the Board of Directors approve wage or salary increases for 15 employees this month. 7 OAC employees are being promoted through the posting process. 2 OAC employees are being promoted for natural job progressions through their job family. And 6 SPA employees are being promoted as well. And there are no new hire SPA ratifications for the month. Any questions on that letter? Okay, and just briefly a reminder that open enrollment is currently going on. Open enrollment will continue through November 25th. And a little bit of information on our process right now. We are virtually trying to provide additional communication to our employees through some virtual sessions that we talked about last month. We are also accepting employees' enrollment forms through an email system, so we are accepting them electronically as well as in hard copy this year. And we continue to move through our what we used to have at the benefits fair, which would be our vaccination clinics. We always hold some flu shot clinics in general throughout the year. We have had 5 of those. And then we have 2 vaccination clinics, one that occurred on the 30th of October and one that will occur on November 20th. And those 2 clinics are open to employees, family members, spouses, retirees and their spouses. And those include the flu shots, shingles, and pneumonia. And so we did have a very full clinic on the 30th, as well as the Methodist mammogram mobile at our facility that day, and we had a full slate for that day as well. Any questions on open enrollment?
Bonnie, I'm sorry, Mike, go ahead. Mine is about something other than open enrollment, so go ahead.
Asking about open enrollment.
Okay.
I just wanted to ask real quick. I
Yes.
haven't seen it. Do we have any active job postings on our website?
We do. Well, I'm not sure if they are active on our website. I think we may have 1 external posting right now, but I thought you might ask about jobs and our current availability. We have 6 jobs with requisitions that are going through the approval process right now, so those come in on a frequent basis. We have 7 jobs that are in the application, review, and interview process. We have 6 jobs that are internally or externally posted. A couple of them are actually going to be posted tomorrow, so 6 in total. And we have 2 jobs with selected candidates that are in the hiring process.
Could you do me a favor?
Sure.
In the future, at the board meetings, you always give the employee count.
Sure.
13.
Yes.
Could you go through the job openings like that real quick?
You bet.
At that time?
No problem. Thanks, Mike.
Hey, Bonnie, with the spike in COVID cases throughout the world, throughout the country, in Douglas County, it's only natural that the district has been affected by that as well. I'm not going to ask for specific numbers, but I've had 2 different conversations this past week with employees who, it's my understanding, there's COVID leave that's provided should an employee be exposed or they themselves get afflicted with the virus. the concern raised to me was employees who may have been on quarantine a few months ago and they're exposed again, or they themselves get the virus. And if they've exhausted their annual or sick leave or COVID leave, then they're forced to make the choice of, do I stay home unpaid, or do I come to work and continue to perhaps expose my colleagues? So that's a difficult choice for the employees to make that determination of, gosh, do I go unpaid for a couple weeks, or do I come to work and perhaps expose my colleagues? What's been the guidance for employees on that front?
That's a great question. And you are right. We have seen an increase, especially in the last 5 weeks, particularly with exposure from family members or household members and extended family where events have occurred outside of an employee's home. So we do have a variety of benefits available to the employees. We announced our 80 hours of pandemic leave that we are now required to comply with under the FFCRA, so Families First Coronavirus Relief Act. We announced our option for that on March 18th, and then we began with just a few scenarios where an employee could use that benefit. And then with the advent of FFCRA, that number of options expanded to 8 different options. So it is available if an employee has had exposure and has to quarantine. It is also available if an employee is diagnosed positive and is advised then to isolate. But it's also available if an employee feels they are high risk, or they are taking care of other family members who may be high risk or may be exposed. It's also available if an employee is looking to care for a child under the age of 18 who otherwise does not have school or child care available. So there are a variety of options. And so in addition to that, if an employee tests positive, we have waived our 1 week of elimination period for them to qualify for supplemental sick leave. So that benefit is available. They would use their 80 hours of pandemic leave if they have any. If they do not, maybe they exhausted it earlier in the year, as you mentioned, maybe took care of children, or maybe had a previous exposure. They would then be able to immediately begin using that supplemental sick leave benefit as of the day of their test, and then until they are released to come back. So as long as they've had a year of service, that is available to them. If they have not, then just like with any other illness or injury, they would only have available their personal paid time, or we in all pandemic cases, if somebody does not have paid leave available, we are authorizing approved unpaid time for that individual, so that that absence does not count against their attendance. But if they have unpaid time, and even if they have paid time, we are advising employees and trying to continue to communicate that any employees that have participation in the VOIA Voluntary Deferred Compensation Plan, there is an authorization now for a coronavirus-related distribution of funds. It is extremely simple. There is no approval process needed at the district. I spoke with an employee last week whose child was diagnosed, and the employee had to take time to care for them. They didn't lose any money, but they were going to have to support that child and some other financial obligations. And so that same day, we received the request from VOIA, and it was signed and submitted. So you are right, Jim. There is 80 hours available, and we are really working to try to help our employees get through the rest of this year. We don't know yet if the 80 hours of federal leave will be required after the first of the year, but we have no intention of not continuing to offer that, because, as I said, we were offering it before we were even required to provide that.
Sure, and knowing full well that this is a dilemma that every organization, public sector, private sector, is dealing with. The Voya plan that you just mentioned, has that been well publicized for the employees?
Yes, and we have done a recent communication to employees within the last few weeks, and we continue to communicate. But a specific flyer for them of benefits available to them, we have two different communications for them, and they are on the intranet, and we continue to communicate them to the supervisors as well, so the supervisors can have these conversations. And the Voya distribution information is included on that. And of course, I would just add, and Mark perhaps has some additional comments, but we are also continuing to communicate the prevention that we have in place for our employees, and the policies that we have to help support them and provide a safe and healthy work environment. And so that includes hand sanitizer stations, that includes air purifiers in the crew shacks. We've moved back to single occupancy within the vehicles so that employees, can take their break or eat their lunch there and not necessarily be exposed to others without a face mask on. Certainly, we're providing masks for employees, and like I said, communicating the 3 C's: cover your face, contact, so limit your close contact, and now I'm clean hands, so hand sanitizing. So anyway, yes, like I said, you're right. I've reached out. We network with the other area utilities. I just spoke with 2 of them this week. They're experiencing a very similar increase in cases.
Thanks, Bonnie.
You're welcome.
Bonnie, do you have, does the district have donated leave programs where you can donate leave?
We
from
do
friends or
not
whatever?
currently, but it is something that Mark and Heather Casey, our payroll supervisor, and I have pulled some information together on, and we are hoping to have something available possibly for 21. I don't know that it would be likely in 20.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
That's a really good suggestion.
Mark Mendenhall, Senior Vice President, General Counsel, just wanted to add on a few things. Great question, Mr. Bagley and Mr. Kavanaugh. And Bonnie hit on all of the right points. I guess I want to just emphasize a couple other things, and I'm aware of the instances that you've spoken about and have had conversations just as recently as Tuesday evening with one of the stewards of IBEW 1521, as well as Ms. Kroll. And I believe that this was a topic at their meeting on Tuesday evening. So the effort from the district really started in earnest in March, and that 80 hours was something that we put together in an MOU, a Memorandum of Understanding with 1521. And since I'm mentioning their name, I'll take this moment to thank them both. I think Tom and Terry and their leadership teams have been really excellent to work with and have represented their folks well. So the 80 hours is at full pay, and the FFCRA might not allow for that if you're just looking at that. So in addition to someone's vacation and sick leave, that 80 hours has been set aside by the district to ensure that the people that have one of those conditions or one of those circumstances, that they're going to get that full pay for that period of time. When we set that 80 hours up, I don't want to say we were making it up as we went along, but there were so many unknowns in March about the transmission of this virus, the duration of the virus. And so what we've said is, let's just continue to evaluate this. And we want to make sure that we get it right for our employees, but we also want to make sure we're getting it right for our ratepayers as well. And so every day at 3 o'clock, we're having this incident command call where we're talking through a lot of these statistics, and because we want to make sure that we get it right. So I just mentioned it, Mr. Bagley, on Tuesday evening. Again, I had these conversations because I am aware of certain circumstances where an individual has had to stay home without pay. And so what we've told the union group is, let's make sure, let's look through all of those 2 or 3 examples, because there's no one circumstance that is that affects everyone. Each circumstance seems to be different. It's like, okay, well, maybe I was exposed and I had to stay at home for 4 or 5 days back in June, and then something else happened in August, and here now in October, now I'm positive and I need to stay at home. And so we're going to look at any and all of those cases, and I committed to sitting down with Ms. Kroll and her team to just really contrast and compare what those individual circumstances were with what we said in the MOU. Let's make sure we get it right. If we didn't get it right, let's fix it. And another thing that I would mention is the senior team. What we've talked about is, again, no one knows how this is going to progress. It certainly doesn't seem like it's getting better anytime soon. And so let's continue to be open-minded with how we're going to approach this in 2021. I'd also mention, in addition to those leaves that we set aside, we've also put significant effort into keeping employees safe while they're at work. And as you know, there's people like me that can sit at a home with my kids running around behind me, and I can do my work from a computer. But there's men and women working for us that have to run a backhoe and have to run a dump truck. They can't do it from home, so they got to be out. So it's been a challenge, but I think that we've done, in my opinion, a pretty nice job with making sure that all of those people are safe. And so we've got a mask policy. We've got certainly hand sanitizing policy. We've made sure hand sanitizer is available on different facilities and in different crew trucks. You know that we went through that isolation effort back in the spring. We've increased our cleaning and disinfection efforts. We've installed, or in the process of installing, some air purifiers in all of the crew shacks. We've created an effort to make sure that we're getting more than one person out of the cab of the car, and so we're allowing people to bring their personal trucks or cars or whatever, personal vehicles to job sites. So we don't have two people sitting in a cab, which happens a lot when they're going to job sites or when they're breaking for lunch. They'll go and sit in a warm place and have their sandwich. And so a lot of challenges that we're trying to resolve, all in an effort to keep people safe. And Mr. Bigley, I hope that if someone does have symptoms, that it's an easy choice for them that they stay at home and not risk spreading it. One thing that's been repeated to me several times is that, I'll say guys, but these men and women that are in these crews, that they're like family, and that they spend so much time together that is their family. And so I'm really hopeful and optimistic that they are treating each other like family, and they're not going to risk spreading that to someone else, so that they're going to stay home, and then we're going to make sure that we're doing right by them as well as the ratepayers. So
sure. And Mark, I thank you for that, and I would just encourage you to continue, and Bonnie, the open dialogue with 1521 and our employees. And I would encourage employees to continue to stay vigilant. And from a personal standpoint, I can speak to this. I had the virus within the last 6 weeks, so I thought I was being vigilant and washing my hands, wearing a mask. That's why I missed last month's meeting. I had mild symptoms. I didn't think I had it. I went for 2 runs the week that I apparently got it. So it's very important. And Mark, you mentioned making it up as we went along. That's what a lot of people have done. That's not an insult to anything that's been done with the decision-making process. So I know we're all trying to do the best we can, but just keep that open dialogue and continue for everybody to stay vigilant with the 3 C's, Bonnie.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Bonnie, I do have another one for you. Could you review the date of the next vaccination clinic, the location, and if people need an appointment?
Thank you. It is November 20th. It is located at our Operations Center on 3100 South 61st Avenue. It is just inside the door, so there's no check-in or security required. And there is a reservation required. And so if you do have questions on that, I would encourage you to reach out to myself or Stefan. His name is Stefan Medell. He is managing the registrations. And I will give you his phone number. That can be shared, 402-504-7888. And
That's
he
really
can
helpful. Thank
help
you.
you get registered. You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, accounts and expenditures, finances and rates. Mr. Shafford, please provide the 2021 budget workshop for personnel and capital.
Good morning, Joe Shafford. I serve as the Chief Financial Officer for the district, and I will be speaking to the information that you can find behind tab 14 as well as on the screens. This is appropriately titled a workshop because the budget is a work in process. We're going to focus on both personnel and capital this morning. And what you're going to see is pretty much what's been submitted with one exception, and that'll become apparent as we view that schedule. And a couple things to keep in mind as you look at the information to be presented. Year to year, not unlike prior years, you do see an increase both in personnel as well as capital. And as you know, we have many different ways that we pay for this. We've affectionately called it the color of money. There are different rate components that are used to pay for certain things. There are general rate increases that are used. And sometimes developers pay for, water mains in new subdivisions. So as you think about that, and again, this is not any request for approval. It's not any request for a rate increase. But I put this out there just so you can be aware of it. So each 1% increase to the commodity or variable component on the water side brings in about $490,000, and each 1% on the gas side brings in about $380,000. Just to set the tone for what you're going to see. Again, many different ways to fund things. So we'll start first off with personnel. So upper left quadrant, you'll see the 2020 budget, full-time as well as part-time. You can see we're going from 867 to an as-submitted number of 885, an increase of 18 full-time positions. We're estimating that we will exit the year at 857. You just heard Ms. Savine talk about a headcount of 809 at the end of October. So I would say that's probably a bit optimistic that we'll get there, but people have, well-intentioned. They do this in August. We're doing a lot of things to try to fill positions. That's why you sometimes see that. Lower left quadrant, as well as a stacked bar chart, gives the composition between SPA and OAC employees. I've been here since 2013. This number ranges from 7129 to 6931. It seems like it's always around that 70-30 ratio. The lower right pie chart with lots of colors. All of those titles probably make a lot of sense. They're pretty intuitive. I will call out Enterprise Services. That's Mr. Zeller's organization. And that's comprised of purchasing, meter services, stores, and facility management. And then all other is the smaller departments like President's Office, Accounting, HR, Corporate Communications, Infrastructure Integrity, Marketing and Legal. And that's 80 employees in that little slice. So that gives you kind of a sense for what's been requested. So this next slide is a line chart that compares budgeted headcount for 2020 versus the bar charts, which is what we've actually experienced. And I do want to call out the green line. What the green line is reflective of is when we do the budget, we put an attrition adjustment in there, meaning at any point in time we know there's positions in the process of being filled and it takes some time. So we have used a 3% attrition number. We don't assign that to positions any longer. We used to, and all we did was create confusion in the organization. I pointed out only in that the green line represents the dollars for positions. There's effectively 841 positions funded in the budget for 2020. Now, with that said, you can see that the blue bars don't even reach that number. Now, some of that was intentional because, as the board is aware, going through the pandemic, we did an intentional deferral of 32 positions. Now, with what's being assumed that we'll exit the year with, the assumption is many of those will be hired and we'll exit the year with those hired. I think the reality is with 8 weeks left in the year, that'll be a stretch. But that's the intention. The couple other things I would point out is we always look at, I'll say, demographics. When you think about running any company, you're concerned about people retiring and what have you. There is a slide in the appendix that talks about retirement statistics. And through September 30th, 22 people have retired. Average age of the retiree has been 61. Average years of service has been 28. So obviously, as the board is aware, we have a very tenured workforce, which provides people the ability to do very well in their jobs because they know their jobs well. The other thing I would point out is we also look at, of the remaining employees, you know, what's the demographic? What are the ages? So we drew a line in the sand and did the schedule on October 16. At that time, we had 84 employees that were age 60 or older with 5 years of service. So they're vested in the pension plan, basically eligible to retire. That represents 10.4% of the workforce, which is significant. It was 10.2% a year ago. So we have remained I'll say, seasoned workforce for some period of time. The other thing that we're doing that I think is much more intentional as we plan for this is Human Resources on a frequent basis issues what they call a separation map, which captures these people that are eligible that I just mentioned. But the other thing that it captures is that people have reached out to HR and said, run a retirement analysis for me. What's that looking like? Because people do retire younger than 60 at the district. The last count on that separation map was 97 people. So there's lots and lots of people thinking about it. That's just the reality that we're in. Next, we'll move to travel and memberships. The vast majority of the travel we do relates to training or industry associations. We don't entertain when we travel. That's not the travel we do. This is the one thing that we've caught that's been submitted, and I thought it was kind of a no-brainer in light of the pandemic we're going through, and all we did was we said there will very likely be no trips between January and April. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I am, and it's perhaps going to extend beyond that, as we all know. As a comparative for 2020, we shut down travel early on in March. So you saw a budgeted number, subsequent to topside of $231,000. We spent $19,462. So, and we won't spend any more this year. And I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. As you get down to memberships, again, there's detailed schedules in the appendix that supports each of these lines. But by virtue of the people we employ, lots of individual memberships and association dues that are out there for attorneys and accountants and water operators and engineers and safety personnel, on and on and on. The reason you see the increase is that some of these are biennial. So every 2 years, water operators, for example, their licenses are due in 2021, and that's 9,000 of that increase. So that's the vast majority of it. When you get into company-wide memberships, virtually unchanged year to year. There's 12 different memberships listed in the appendix. Things like American Public Gas Association, American Water Works, things of that nature. Then when you get down to the tan highlight, the total memberships funded by the NNG Marketing Fund, these are up a little bit, as you can see, 24,000 nearly. And the reason for that is we anticipate that the Street of Dreams function will be back in our market area for 2021. So we help fund that, we sponsor that, or a co-sponsor. Those are things like Prosper Omaha, Chamber of Commerce, Metro Omaha Builders, things like that. So that's the reason that those are going up a bit. Now we're going to get into a little bit busier slides. I'll try to keep this from being too painful. So this is the water department capital. Top section's mains, bottom section's buildings, land, and equipment, and then you have other distribution property. The column that I've highlighted with the red outline is what we think we'll spend in 2020 versus what the 2020 budget was. So you should have an apples to apples comparison in terms of what the projects are. And I apologize, I don't think the hard copy is highlighted in your binders. So if you look at the first arrow, the orange arrow, the top arrow, that corresponds with the cast iron mains. That's the infrastructure replacement, although infrastructure replacement is more encompassing than cast iron, but that's the cast iron main type. We think we'll replace 12.75 miles in 2020, which is virtually the same as what we assumed in the budget, which I think is an amazing testament to our crews in light of what this year has been all about. And I say crews and all the supporting cast behind the crews because it takes a village, so to speak, to put mains in, like it does for a lot of things. The reason it's below budget, really two reasons. First off, a mile of main's not a mile of main. You make estimates and things turn out different sometimes. The other thing is the budget assumed $1.5 million per mile. Turns out it includes services, which is captured out, elsewhere. So it should have been about 1.2, and that's about what it's been. So that's the first 1.8 million you're seeing. Sliding down to the next arrow, the what is it, color blue arrow, hard to even see at this distance. That's relocation mains. These are hard to predict, as you might imagine. It's largely driven by road work. So federal funding affects this. The recent passage of the Omaha street bond issue will affect this over the next 5 years and perhaps beyond. So dropping down to the yellow arrow, that is construction contract mains. Those are the subdivisions. Despite what's going on, lots of subdivision work going on, paid for by developers. This is the interior mains on a subdivision. So those are not paid by ratepayers, but paid for by the developers. Heading down to the green arrow, those are pioneer mains. They tend to track with the direction that the previous main, the subdivision main type is. These tend to be the approach mains to a subdivision, where the other main type was the interior mains. This can also be pioneer mains to some of the developments that are going on out there, commercial developments. Ms. Henn talked about Project Wizard, some of these data centers. Some of those mains are in support of things like that as well. So moving down to, let's see where I'm at, down to Platte South. You see we are 2.6 million under budget. Effectively what that represents is a shift to 2021. When the pandemic hit, not only did we look at deferring positions, we also looked at deferring capital. A lot of that 2.6 was an intentional deferral to 2021. Buildings, land, and equipment other. What that $1 million overage is pre-ordering some equipment for the West Dodge pump station. You'll see that when I talk about 2021 capital, as well as the capital in the out years. And then finally, construction machines. Again, largely a shift from 20 to 21. The other line I want to draw your attention to is that the very bottom line, that tan line for what's on the screen, not highlighted in your books. That is the funding that occurs when others pay for mains, like developers. So you can see there are asterisks by certain main types. Those are the main types that are oftentimes paid for by developers or others. So then moving on to just a synopsis of 2021 budgeted spending as submitted. And I keep saying as submitted because I think it's unlikely we'll be able to pay for all this. So you'll see probably a different set of numbers in December. Cast iron mains is the dark blue chunk starting, and we'll progress clockwise around the pie chart. The goal for 2021 is to abandon/replace 16 miles of cast iron water mains, 7.75 miles performed by our crews, 8.25 by our third-party contracting partners. Obviously, lots and lots of mains yet to replace. That's not a secret to this board, so that'll be an effort that you'll see for many, many years into the future. All other mains, the slider blue slice is all the other main types we talked about, relocation, subdivisions, pioneer mains, etc. The Florence slice, the kind of burgundy slice, is straight out of their capital improvement plan. You can see 11.4 million. Some of the bigger projects in 2021 include site piping design and construction, that's 6.1. Basin 3 rehab of 3 million, and then lots of other things that make up that 11.4. Platte South is the beginning of the Platte South capital improvement plan. It hasn't yet been developed, but money will be spent to develop it in 2021 and to start designing and building pursuant to that capital improvement plan. Construction machines, again, largely a deferral from 2020, which is why that spikes, or that piece of the pie is a little bigger than it would be otherwise. There's the West Dodge pump station that I referenced when I talked about the $1 million purchase of equipment in 2020. So we expect that $6.5 million will be spent in 2021. And then the all other category, a whole bevy of things, as you can imagine. One of the things I might point out that's in there is land acquisition costs for a water reservoir somewhere in our system. Probably, well, I won't speak. I'm not sure if Southwest will be first or Northwest, but we have dollars in there for land purchases. So now we look at a 5-year view, and as the board is aware, you certainly don't vote on anything beyond 2021 when we have our meeting next month. But the 5-year view is really important because, first off, you have to plan on how you're going to pay for this, and you have to plan well in advance of how you're going to pay for this, as you might imagine. One of the colors of money we rely on is borrowing, i.e. bond offerings. And just to remind the board, the water side, we currently have 3 bond offerings outstanding, the 2012, 15, and 18 bonds outstanding, issued at a face amount of $267 million. We'll exit 2020 with about $212 million of principal. And of course, there are annual interest and principal payments to service those bonds. The 3 bonds combined cost us $19.9 million a year to service them. So again, great strategy. You spread out the financing of a project to more than one generation of ratepayers, but obviously there's principal and interest payments, just like when we borrow for our house. So to talk about the bars just a little bit, the dark blue bar, of course, is the water infrastructure replacement. We'll exit 2020 with about 1,184 miles of cast iron water mains to replace, so that you see that bar growing and ramping. We expect that to grow from 16 miles in 2021 to 25 miles by the time we exit this 5-year time period in increments as you go. Obviously, a very significant effort underway. We're funding it with two primary sources. There's a fixed fee, the water infrastructure rider or surcharge. The way the average residential consumer thinks about that is they pay $4 a month in a fixed fee for that. The other thing that we put in place, and the board is aware of, we did a 2-tier rate increase related to a infrastructure component of commodity. First increment went in July 1 of 19, second one went in January of 20. And the two combined provide good funding for that. It's just that as you ramp the miles and you ramp the cost per mile, we're not done with that rate increase component, shall we say. Excuse me. The light blue bar, is all the other main types we talked about. Florence is the red bar or the burgundy bar. That again is right out of their capital improvement plan. Big things in there in 2021 and 2022. We have some site piping, et cetera, at $17.6 million. Basin 3 rehab at $4.2 million in 2021 and 22, and it just goes off the CIP from there. You can see the amounts do diminish a bit, and as you know, the pattern of that spend is all about how you're going to replace different components of that plant. The yellow bar is Platte South, and again, that's the CIP plan I talked about. I would call these numbers estimates or placeholders because the CIP is not developed yet. It will be in 2021. The green bar that you'll see in the early years, 21 and 22, is the West Dodge Pump Station. And finally, the orange bar is all other cumulative, and there's, like I said, land acquisition costs in both 21 and 22 for water reservoirs. Next, we'll move to the gas side. Kind of a very similar, just a kind of a recap of what we think we're going to spend in 2020 versus what we budgeted. So the orange arrows, the reason you see 3 orange arrows is that's all the spending that relates to the replacement of gas cast iron mains. So if you combine all 3 of those orange arrows, we're $1.6 million over budget, and the explanation for that is back to a mile of main's not a mile of main. We think we're going to do between 38 and 40 miles in terms of what we'll abandon, roughly 15 miles district crews, 25 miles a contractor. Again, I'd say in light of these circumstances, I think it's remarkable we're that close to what our goals were. I mean, I commend the people. It's mentally tough to get out there, not to mention physically tough. So again, kudos to the crews that are accomplishing this. Relocation mains, not unlike the water side, very hard to predict. 1.5 million over. A lot of road work going on, as we know from driving around the city, and that will, again, continue to increase with the Omaha's bond offering. As you get down into the buildings, land, and equipment section, the LNG propane is the yellow arrow. Jim Knight talked about this last month in his presentation on the LNG plant rebuild, if you will. The 2021 budget will have $20 million in there for that. Those remain, as you might imagine, preliminary estimates. Until we get this fully designed, it'll be hard to know exactly what it costs, so there's contingency in there. But we have $20 million in there. Likely will be bond financed. It's not like we'll ask today's ratepayers to pay $20 million on that this year. The building, land, and equipment, all other. The reason there's multiple green arrows is that we have all the spending for the HQ project captured on that one line that's showing an overage of 3.9, but the budget's spread out between 3 lines. So that by the time you combine everything, we continue to believe that the headquarters will be on time and under budget. until we occupy that building, until the last thing is done, we're not ready to commit how far below budget we'll be, but I think it's a safe assumption we'll be below budget, and I think that's a great sign. Kudos to the team involved with doing that, with John and Melissa and many others supporting that effort. And then finally, motor vehicles. I would say virtually all of that's timing. We talked about it earlier about the purchase of the pickup trucks. We're kind of behind in addressing our fleet, and we're trying to get caught up, and I think we're going at it the right way with a cost of ownership approach and a much more methodical approach. It costs money, and it's largely being shifted to a future year. A couple other comments on this slide. If you look at the rightmost column, I'm not going to talk about variances because it's not real meaningful in that you have unique sets of projects between budget years. But what I think is noteworthy is that with the exception of the buildings, land, and equipment area, there's not a lot of change between budgets. And so that just means, like on the main side, for example, the biggest driver of that is the infrastructure replacement. We're on track to do 40 miles a year until that's done in 2027. And the nature of that work changes a little bit as we get closer to the end, but I will speak on future slides to the variability that you're seeing on the bottom section. And then the final thing to point out, again, that tan section, back to a different color of money. So this is spending on peak shave. And firm customers pay this via a separate rate component. So when we increase spending or even increase that component, it's not something the board has to vote on. It's a pass-through cost, not unlike the cost of the natural gas itself. So that's just another color of money. There is a slide in the appendix that addresses that directly. So again, I'll talk just about a couple of the pie slices, if you will, because many of them don't change very much. So the first one, as we mentioned, is the propane, basically the rebuild of a propane plant. So the first phase of that's vaporization side. Again, the thought is we'll spend $20 million on that. So that's virtually all of the 22.8 you see. There's other things basically that got deferred from 2020, namely tank modifications, that propane water pump we talked about earlier in the meeting. That's why that's 22.8. You see the orange slice is the new construction center. Mr. Mendenhall talked about the land acquisition associated with that, so we'll have that cost in 2021, as well as design and a little bit of construction. As you can imagine, you'll see on the 5-year view in the next slide, we have an assumption in there for the construction center, but it's early. I mean, it's very early on in the process to try to put a number to that. And then finally, the other slide, or the other slice of the pie, I should say, that's an increase, is motor vehicles. And again, that's largely a deferral from prior years and trying to get back into a more methodical approach to replacing vehicles. Then the final slide I'm going to go over is the same stack bar chart on the gas side that we looked at for water. Again, important to look at a long-term view. The board may even recall, and Jim talked about the LNG rebuild at the last meeting. That was in last year's 5-year view. It was just, they were much more preliminary numbers. So as you continue to refine, these numbers get better, and they need to continue to get better because we need much tighter estimates before I'd ever do a bond offering to try to finance it. On the gas side, there's only one bond outstanding. We did that in 2018 to help fund the increased or accelerated infrastructure replacement on the gas side. That bond was for $31.6 million. We'll have $29.5 million outstanding at the end of 2020, and it costs about $2.2 million a year to service that bond between principal and interest payments. So when you get to the different slices, or the different components of the bars, I should say, the dark blue is the cast iron replacement. Again, we expect to be done in 2027. We will exit 2020 with approximately 176 miles remaining. And to give the board a heads up, it's very likely we'll need another bond offering to finish this initiative. And the reason I say that is that we have a rate component, a fixed rate component, the gas infrastructure rider, that average residential customer pays $3 a month for that rider. We will spend, over the period of time listed here, between the capital side and service connects, we'll spend $117 million. That rate component will bring in $67 million over that same time period. So a $50 million deficiency. We're in a good cash position on the water side, or excuse me, on the gas side. We can spend some of it down, but we're not in that kind of position, especially in light of other needs that are out there. So there will very likely be a bond issuance for that, either in late 21 or early 22. Moving up, the yellow bar is the propane LNG rebuild. That's the thing that Jim Knight talked about. It's going to take place over a number of years. The very preliminary estimates size that at $78 million. But again, those will be refined further as we move on. As we move up, the orange color of the bar is the new construction center at the property location, potentially, that Mr. Mendenhall talked about. That is sized in total at $38.5 million at this point, which includes land acquisition costs. Very early estimate that will be continue to be refined. Moving up the bars, the green bar, the spend in 2020 is largely the new HQ, then it drops dramatically from there. But in the future years, we'll have things like the construction center roof replacement. We have to let the construction center settle down a bit, stabilize a bit before we're going to do that. But that's in there. There's also ongoing money every year to review the operating center and make the improvements we need to at the operating center. Obviously, we'll still have people working there. It needs to be the most functional space it can be. So we're going to continue to spend money on that facility as well. It's not just HQ, it's all of our facilities as part of this facility master plan. And then finally, the light blue bar on the top is the motor vehicles. As again, it starts off big, and then I think you see it kind of reverts to normal, a normal replacement schedule where the state of the fleet requires it to be a bit abnormal now, but it will revert to normal in the future. So that's the extent of my comments. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to take them. Yes, Director Cook?
You said that you're looking at replacing the roof on the construction center.
Right.
And we're looking at buying land to potentially put an alternate or additional construction center.
Right.
At. So we're going to have two, and one's kind of depreciating, but we're putting a roof on it. I guess I don't.
Oh,
do we need two?
Yes, we need two.
Okay, we need more than one.
Yes.
And we're
if you would
trying to
see-
maintain the one that has the cracks and all
we
that.
definitely need two. With the size fleet we have and the vehicles that we have to park inside, we absolutely need two, and probably have needed two for a little while.
All right, thank you.
I don't think we want all our eggs in one basket either in
Right.
today's world.
I see.
With weather factors and things, we run the risk of having our entire fleet taken from us in one swoop. So this will give us a little bit of diversity on security as well.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Right. Any further questions? Thank you. Yes, Mike, I'm sorry.
And I'm the chair of the AEF&R committee, and I just want to share with the rest of my board members, I had a discussion with Joe I'll take this off. I had a discussion with Joe this morning before the meeting. We aren't asked to vote on this today, but next meeting in December, we're asked to vote on the capital and expense and any rate increase proposal. I told Joe, from my standpoint on the AEF&R, I would really like him to sharpen his pencil and come in with no rate increase on gas and water because of the COVID. The economic situation we're in right now, I think a rate increase to the public would not go over very well. But so, and I know we need some rate increases, but what I told Joe is let's look at deferring them. We did a water increase in the summer. Maybe let's defer it until May or June. Let's look at it then. Let's see if we can get through January or this next meeting where we take a vote and not have any rate increases in this environment. And that's what I'd like to see. And Joe said they're looking at this stuff right now. They're going through it, and I just wanted to express my view that I'd like to see no rate increase. I don't know what the rest of you think about that.
Oh, I concur. Just having learned about how people are applying for those funds to catch up on their bills, and as we've talked about in this meeting, really no particular end in sight. And, if you've ever been behind, I'm assuming everybody in this room at some point has been a little bit behind. Not only is it stressful emotionally, in addition to the stress of COVID environment, it's hard to catch up. And so they're not just behind with us, they're probably, who knows where they're behind. And if they're having to take off work and all that, so I agree.
And let me also say that you see what Joe has gone through, what we're planning to do, a construction center, new vehicles and all that. These are costs that are not going to go away. We're going to have to deal with them at some point. We're going to have some rate increases to get some more funds coming in. I'm asking them to look at maybe deferring some costs if we can, and deferring the action on the rates until we have to take it. And maybe next spring, who knows if we've got it behind us, but at some point in time, we may have to take some extraordinary action, like a rate increase on the gas side in May, water increase in July, or something like that. But let's try and avoid a rate increase January 1st as this pandemic is hopefully getting under control.
Joe, if I may ask, if it'd be appropriate, and Mike, your suggestion is very commendable, given what we're living through. Based on the information you just presented for the budget for 2021, do you have a ballpark as to what, based on this, what, if any, rate increase we would have on the gas and water side and all the above?
You know, I don't. What I will tell you is when we did the last water rate increase, as the board is likely recalls, all of that was devoted to building a fund to replace water infrastructure. And so there were many, many meetings with the commercial industrial users because it was, you know, that was a big component of their costs. As part of those meetings, we shared that we would do a 3.5% water rate increase for water in 2021. And we gave them a multi-year schedule. So they are kind of anticipating that. Now, that's not to say that residential customers have any expectation, but that's what they're expecting. In light of what we're trying to do on the water side, it's interesting. So you see cash statistics every month, and we're strong on both sides of the business, as you're aware. Part of the reason we're strong on the water side is we build a fund to help with this accelerated water infrastructure replacement program that we have in place. And by the time we hit 25 miles, that's a big annual spend, not a one-time spend. So if you, and what I don't want to do is spend the money that it's not really encumbered, but effectively it's been identified for that purpose. I don't want to spend money from that fund for anything besides infrastructure replacement. I just don't think that's being transparent with our ratepayers. If you strip those funds out of our water balance, we're not that much above our 180-day goal. In fact, I did that math. We're at 201 days cash on the water side without that. So it's going to be hard to defer for very long on the water side because those cash, I mean, as I shared with the board, we recently had a credit refresh with Moody's and we retain an AA2 rating, which is very important to borrowing. And we know that this business relies on issuing bonds. So we, you know, it's this, I mean, I don't think there's anybody in this room that would say, we don't want to do any rate increases anytime soon. It's just that we're running a system of a size that is of the age that it's just going to be difficult to defer things for much longer. On the gas side, we're healthier on cash, but a lot of that spending you saw, the gas has a pretty good, I mean, the gas side owns the buildings for the most part, except for water plants, and the water side, leases it from them. So the gas side puts out the cash first. So you've got a second construction center being on the gas side, you've got headquarters funded on the gas side, and you've got an annual drawdown of cash related to that gas infrastructure of north of $10 million. So that cash is going to drop quickly, absent some steps to take to keep, you know, kind of mitigate that and refresh the coffers.
And if we did defer rate increases for 21, would that then mean we would have to make up for it 22, 23, and that would be a consideration that we would have a discussion on?
Well, and not only that, but not only make it up from a rate increase perspective, but very likely defer a lot of what you're seeing. I mean, I just can't let cash drop below a certain level. We came from that place, and I don't ever want to be in that place again.
And again, Mike, your suggestion is well taken, given what we're living. I'm not being critical at all, but just some things we'll need to consider as a board.
Well, I agree. I told Joe, I said, you know, I know we need some rate increases. We need to keep our cash reserves built up. We need to be financially smart. We can't rob Peter to pay Paul, like you said, from the water infrastructure cash.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, what I'd like you to do is say, you know, can we defer it? Can we, instead of having a gas rate increase on January 1st, can we do it May 1st, April 1st? Defer it a few months so that we can go out to the public and say, hey, we're tightening our belt, we're cutting costs, and we're going to defer an increase that we really need to have, but it's going to be coming. You know, we got to pay for all this. But I'm just saying, in the public spectrum, it just seems like it'd be a good message.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate those comments. Yes.
I agree. We certainly can't kick this can down the road very far. But, you know, a couple of months to get through winter, that has a lot of appeal to it. I've always been of the belief that increases should be very slow and consistent, not zero and then all of a sudden like this, because that doesn't go over well. We've seen that in the past.
Yes.
And we don't gain anything by that. But perhaps a month or two deferral might have some merit to it, if, as long as we don't get behind on our plans, because we end up paying more later.
And we can certainly, you know, as part of this, we'll run sensitivity on timing. Absolutely, we will.
And that's all, that's what I'm looking for,
Sure.
you know, just so we have some variables that we can evaluate. And I'm like you, Tim, I don't wanna wait, but we haven't had a rate increase on the gas side since when?
14, I think, was when we last did the.
2014. So
yeah.
we're doing real good
Yeah.
on the gas side. It's the water side, but we had that couple of increases a couple years ago, and we did it in the summertime. You know, and that's what I'm saying. Let's
Yeah.
see if we can get some sensitivity, because I'm like you don't want to kick the can down the road, because you got to pay it at some point in time. You don't want to have a 15% increase, you know?
And one more question, and this might be a question for Mr. Mendenhall. Are we required by statute to set rates at the December meeting for the upcoming year, or is that something that can be adjusted throughout 2021?
So, I think I understood the question is can this board set a rate change at any point in the year? And yes, I would say yes.
Okay.
The question that we've addressed in the past is, can this board bind future boards with a multi-year rate increase? That's a different discussion, but if this board wanted to have a discussion in December about, say, a X% increase that it wanted to impose in July or June, certainly we could. Rather, if you'd like to say, well, let's hold off and let's revisit this in May or June or July, we could do that as well. So as long as we're following open meeting guidelines as far as putting that on the agenda and letting the public know that that's going to be the discussion, and they'd have an opportunity to come in and talk about those rates, you bet, that's fine.
Thanks, Mark. And also keep in mind the issue we ran into last year with our large volume users who budget out for the year. We'll also have to be sensitive to their concerns as well.
And maybe what the approach we could consider is, we anticipate having 3.5% water increase January 1st. But because of the economic situation and COVID and everything, we're going to defer that and have a 4% increase May 1st. Announce it, and just defer it, but come out and announce it so people know and can budget for it.
Well, and Joe, you're very good at this. Possibly you could bring us in alternate scenarios of how this would work, and then we'd have some things to compare. And right now, you don't even know what the percentage would be, so it's pretty tough.
And certainly there'll be conversations before the December meeting to try to educate you further on maybe the sensitivity we're talking about. So we'll do our best to inform the board prior to that meeting.
And Madam Chair, that's why I talked to Joe today, so that they could start thinking about that.
And he's very good at it, as I said. Do you have any idea of, this may not be your ballpark, but of the folks that are still trying to catch up, the numbers or the aid that's been received?
I don't have the statistic. Stephanie Mueller's people frequently communicate the money that's been granted towards that $2 million that came from the county, as well as the $500,000 from the state. It's still not. Is it 700 and some thousand, Steph, that's been approved in total? So the take rate is still not what we would have expected, maybe, and there's been many communication avenues that are being used to try to address that. Trying to work with Home Fund to make certain the application process is as seamless and easy as it can be. I mean, Steph's people have gone to calling an individual and helping them through an application. So we're doing our best. We monitor the age of receivables, you know, how current are they? They continue to erode a bit. Can you say that you won't ever collect that cash? No. But it, you know, to Director Cook's comments, we all know there's a lot of people struggling. So
and there's probably a time frame when those funds have to be used, or
unless something changes by the end of the year, as I understand it now. Mr. Kubat perhaps can talk about efforts to change that.
Rick Kubat, those funds have to be expended by December 30th of this year. There's talk in DC after the elections of a potential of Coronavirus Relief Act Part 2 That's pretty uncertain. But I do want to let the board know that right now, of the $2 million that Douglas County allocated to Dollar Energy Fund to assist our specific customers, Joe's right. I believe we're just under $800,000. Folks can receive up to $750 from the time frame of March of this year through December 30th. This coming Tuesday, we're going to appear with OPPD in front of the Douglas County Board and ask them to change that cap from $750 to $1,200. So, you know, with the presumption that that happens, that's going to allow us to get closer to spending the full $2 million.
Good, good. Thank you for all you're doing with that.
Thanks, Rick. Anything further? Great, thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
You bet.
Where are we? Well, that concludes the items on the agenda for the committee meetings. Do any of the board members have further comments? Let's see. Is there any member of the public in the audience today who would like to make any comments? And if so, please step up to the podium and state your name and address. Okay. The committee meetings have now concluded. We'll convene in 10 minutes at just a minute after 10. How's that? Thank you. Activities District regular monthly board meeting this morning, November 5th, 2020. This meeting is being broadcast live from the Legislative Chamber at the Omaha Douglas Civic Center, located at 1819 Farnham Street. I would like to remind those in attendance in the chamber today that we must abide by the City Council ordinance requiring that all those present wear a face mask or a face covering in indoor public settings in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Please also continue to be mindful of social distancing. Roll call, please.
Kavanaugh.
Here.
Bagley. Here. Cook. Here. Friend.
Here.
Frost.
Here.
McGowan. Here. Howard.
Here. I'd also like to advise those in attendance that a copy of the Open Meetings Act is available on the wall of the Legislative Chamber. And now for those who wish to participate, we will stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Approval of the minutes for the committee meetings and regular board meeting for October 1st, 2020. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Cook. Yes. Friend.
Yes.
Frost.
Here.
McGowan. Yes. Howard.
Yes. Capital expenses, Director Frost.
I'll do that.
Thank you.
Capital expenditures discussed in committee. I move approval as outlined in the memo from Mr. DeBoer dated October 28th.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Cook. Yes. Friend.
Yes.
Frost.
Yes.
McGowan. Yes. Howard.
Yes. Acceptance of contracts and payments of final estimates. Again, Director Friend, thank you.
Thank you. Also discussed in committee, move approval as outlined in the memo from Stephanie Henn dated October 26th.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Cook. Yes. Friend.
Yes.
Frost.
Yes.
McGowan. Yes. Howard.
Yes. Bids on materials and contracts. Again, Director Friend, please.
Thank you. Bids on materials and contracts discussed in committee. I move approval as outlined in the memo from John Zellers dated October 22nd.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Cook. Yes. Friend.
Yes.
Frost.
Yes.
McGowan. Yes. Howard.
Yes. Notice of purchases between $25,000 and $50,000. Again, Director Friend, please.
Item number 8, notice of purchases be placed on file, please.
Thank you. Declaration and sale of surplus land parcel on South 148th Street. Director Cook.
I move we approve the declaration and sale of surplus land parcel along with the corresponding resolution as outlined in Mr. Mendenhall's letter to the committee dated October 23rd, 2020.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Roll call, please.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Cook.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
Frost.
Yes.
McGowan. Yes. Howard.
Yes. Purchase agreement for property near Blair High Road and State Street. Director Cook, please.
Property purchase agreement. I move we approve the property purchase agreement as outlined in Mr. Mendenhall's letter to the committee dated October 27th, 2020.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Cook.
Yes.
Friend.
Yes.
Frost.
Yes.
McGowan. Yes. Howard.
Yes. Wage and salary increases and ratifications. Director Begley, please.
I move that we approve the wage and salary increases and ratifications as discussed in committee and outlined in Bonnie Savine's memo dated October 22nd, 2020.
Second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please, Mary.
Kavanaugh.
Yes.
Bagley.
Yes.
Cook. Yes. Friend.
Yes.
Frost.
Yes.
McGowan. Yes. Howard.
Yes. Other matters of business, district business for discussion. Do any board members have any further comments?
I do. Where is next month's meeting gonna be?
Well, that's such a good question. And I've got it right here. Let me first ask if any of the members of the public have any comments. No. I'd like to announce that next month's meeting, December 3rd, the regular monthly board meeting will not take place in this legislative chamber. It will take place in Conference Room 702 of the Omaha Douglas Civic Center. And I understand that this is the building, and it'll be on the 7th floor. More information regarding the specific location will be included in the public meeting notice as well as the MUD website. Good?
Do we know what day that will be?
Well, I believe it'll be December 3rd,
that
unless we hear otherwise.
Thursday?
Mary, is that a Thursday?
Okay.
Confirmation, it's a Thursday.
All right.
Thank you. We will now go into closed session for the purpose of discussing litigation, which will be held in this legislative chamber. All of those in attendance, except board members and designated district personnel, are requested to leave the chamber through the main doors at the back of the room. Anyone in attendance is welcome to return to the chamber once the closed session has concluded. Thank you.
Session 2.
Motion to go into closed session.
Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved. Second.
And a second. Thank you. Any discussion regarding that? Nope. Mary, please.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Yes.
Cook? Yes. Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan? Yes. Howard?
Yes. We are now in Into open session? Okay.
So second.
Very good. Any discussion? No. Roll call, please, Mary.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook? Yes. Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
McGowan? Howard?
Yes. Do any of the board members have any further comments they would like to make?
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, we can do
After,
that.
I'm sorry.
Second.
I'm sorry.
Getting ahead of yourselves here.
Sorry.
Anyone in the audience, in our audience, we have to give them the opportunity. Who would like to offer any comments? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And
Second.
a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? I see none. Mary, please.
Kavanaugh?
Yes.
Bagley?
Yes.
Cook? Yes. Friend?
Yes.
Frost?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes. We are adjourned. Thank you.